Hi, everyone. My name is Katrina, and I'm here with my colleague Paloma on behalf of UT Housing Services. As a timestamp, we are recording this in August 2020.
Today, we're going to cover how to navigate Toronto's complicated rental market to find safe and affordable housing that's right for you.
So, Paloma, what is Housing Services?
So, we educate students about renting in Toronto. We offer search tips and strategies, which is what we're doing today. We also connect students to property listings, but as we're not realtors, we don't do individual housing searches on behalf of students.
Conflict is an expected part of renting, so we have partnered with St. Stephen's Community House to offer free mediation and conflict coaching to students, and they are trained mediators themselves. And lastly, we can educate students about their tenant rights and responsibilities. As we are not lawyers, we do not interpret the law on behalf of renters, but can refer you to legal aid and resources if needed.
Today's session will cover how to search and your related tenant rights. The goal of this session is to create a plan to find housing that suits your needs. Make sure to check out the Housing Finder resources page for a copy of the slides.
Okay, so this timeline covers all of the major steps of what's involved in finding a place to live. It doesn't always happen in such a linear way, and you may jump back and forth a few times between viewing and applying for units.
Most students start with the third step of searching for apartments, but we think it's important to take a step back and assess your needs in order to know what to search for. Knowing what you don't want can really help you streamline the search. Determining your needs, including factors like type of housing, budget, and distance from campus, can help you figure out whether you need roommates, which is a great way to save money on rent.
While you're searching, you should always make sure you're asking to view the unit before you apply, sign the lease, or hand over any money. Viewing the unit is a great way to avoid scams.
From there, you can submit a rental application, which indicates interest and makes a formal offer to rent. It is not a lease. We will discuss the documents needed for this rental application later on.
And once your landlord approves your application and says they want you as a tenant, then you sign a lease. We are going to be touching on all the timeline steps in detail through the presentation.
Okay, let's discuss what's involved in understanding your needs as a renter.
So, most tenants in Ontario will be protected under the Residential Tenancies Act, RTA, which sets out the rules and regulations that govern landlord-tenant relationships. Most tenants who rent in Toronto will be under the RTA. However, there are two notable exceptions. The RTA does not apply to students who live in on-campus residence, that is, residence owned and operated by the University of Toronto, and it also doesn't apply when tenants share a kitchen or a bathroom with their landlord or the landlord's immediate family. In that case, you are protected. You still have rights under common law, but you do not have the same protections as a tenant under the RTA.
So it's always worth asking who the other roommates in the rental situation are. It's your personal choice whether you want to live with a landlord or not.
So, Paloma, can you walk us through these different types of housing?
Yep, there are many different types of housing in Toronto. The first one is a room in a shared house. Rooms in a shared house are usually furnished, and although you are renting just the room, you have access to other parts of the house. This is usually where the kitchen or bathroom is shared with the landlord, which, as we've said, means you would not be covered under the RTA. Most private leases in Ontario are 12 months, so a major upside is that if you're looking for a shorter lease, a room in a shared house can be a good option, as landlords may agree to a shorter duration of lease and a shorter amount of notice required to move out. For example, just having to give 3 weeks notice as opposed to 60 days notice under the RTA.
A basement apartment in a house is a private space with a separate kitchen and bathroom than your landlord and may include a separate entrance. In this case, you are protected under the RTA as you may be living in the same house as your landlord, but you have separate spaces, including your kitchen and bathroom. We say basement as it's the most common location for a private unit within the house, but this kind of unit that is private from the landlord and their family, even if you have other roommates, can exist on any floor of the house, even the attic.
So next we have the student housing buildings. Most people will be familiar with on-campus residences, which is owned and operated by U of T and has either partial or full exemption of the RTA. There are also independent off-campus student housing buildings that the university does not own or operate. We'll cover these in detail later. Off-campus housing buildings offer the experience of a residence-like setting, including streamlining your costs such as rent, Wi-Fi, and hydro. You're living with other students and it is catered to students and it is usually close to campus. These residences are under the RTA and as such, technically they can rent to anyone, but it's usually only students that apply.
Then there's the most popular type of housing, units in condos and apartment buildings. The difference between a condo and an apartment building is who you pay your rent to. In a condo, each unit in the building is owned by an individual landlord, so you would pay rent to an individual owner, while in an apartment building, all of the units in the building are owned by a property management company, so you pay your rent to a company. In condos, the property management can assist with maintenance and repairs, but you are paying your rent to an individual. Condos are typically newer, and there are many in Toronto now, but please note that they are generally more expensive than apartments. Scams are also more frequent in condos as it's harder to prove ownership. So if you're renting from abroad, consider an apartment building that you can verify the company ownership.
So the last type of housing we're going to look at is the entire house. This is usually where a large family or a group of friends rents a house, and it can be a great way to split costs while getting a large amount of space. The one drawback is that when renting an entire house, you might have a joint lease. This means that all the names of the tenants are on the lease and they are responsible for paying one single total amount of rent to the landlord. This means that individuals can also become responsible if others fail to pay their share of the rent. As such, we recommend asking of what's known as a tenancy in common, which means that all your names are on the lease, but there are separate agreements to pay the landlord a certain amount of rent, so everyone is responsible for themselves. When you're thinking about budgeting, remember you will have fixed costs like your rent and variable costs like hydro and grocery bills.
With respect to rent, these are all ranges from the Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation that averages the wider Greater Toronto area. Unfortunately, this is not very accurate for housing in downtown Toronto around the St. George campus, so take a look at the averages for more realistic pricing.
In terms of a room for rent, we see on average students paying about $1,200 a month, but you can save on rent if you leave the downtown core and search widely.
A bachelor's apartment, also known as a studio, is priced around $1,800 a month. It's a large room with a walled-off bathroom. The single large room contains your kitchen, bedroom, living room, etc. It's suitable for 1 to 2 people maximum.
With the impact of COVID-19, we're seeing some rent go down, but not in a dramatic way, maybe $100 less than non-COVID times. The good news is that more units seem to be available for prospective tenants. Toronto rental market has been very hot for the past 5 years, and historically, units would be instantly rented by the end of August. But now we're seeing listings stay advertised for longer, which means renters have more options.
In terms of 1 to 3 bedrooms, it really depends on the type of housing. A 1 bedroom in a house versus a 1 bedroom in a condo will have different prices. Condos will usually be on the upper end of the range, so around that $2,500 mark for a 1 bedroom unit. For the 2 to 3 bedroom units, the prices listed are the total cost of the unit, which you can split with roommates. As you can see, privacy comes at a premium. Many tenants live with roommates to save on costs.
You also need to consider the cost of other things beyond rent. So hydro, which is your electricity, ranges in price depending on use. In other buildings, it can get colder in the winter, so your hydro cost might be higher. $50 is usually a base price, but appliances and heating and cooling can make it significantly higher. If you're having many maintenance issues that your building or landlord won't help you resolve, please email our office for assistance.
In terms of internet, you will likely need high-speed internet, especially if you are taking virtual classes, and it's always good to ask for a student discount as most telecommunication companies will offer one.
Tenant insurance is a topic we will be talking about in an upcoming slide, and I encourage you to build that into your budget.
Groceries and the money you spend on them really depends person to person and how much you eat. Some grocery stores have deals such as student discounts, but you can also get on-campus meal plans, either a full meal plan or we suggest you look into T-Bucks, which involves preloading a certain dollar value and using it pay-as-you-go style.
In Toronto, public transportation is about $3.25 for a trip and gives you a 2-hour unlimited window. If you're taking transit often, you might want to consider an unlimited monthly Metro Pass. There are discounts for full-time post-secondary students. Remember to factor in the cost of transit when deciding if you should live farther away, as with cost and time it takes. It may be worth living closer to campus without a commute. There are 3 reasons for getting tenants insurance. First, it protects your personal property. If a random pipe bursts and your laptop, phone, and bed get ruined, then your landlord's insurance will likely not cover that. It will likely cover the replacement of the wall, but not your belongings.
Secondly, similar to car insurance, most policies cover personal liability, which is your responsibility for accidents or negligence. For example, if you got distracted while cooking and set your stove on fire, your landlord would expect you to pay for the repairs. If you don't have tenants insurance, you or whoever is financially responsible for you will have to pay. This amount can be tens of thousands of dollars. We have seen this happen and it can be financially devastating.
Third, it covers living expenses. A few years ago, there was an electrical fire which displaced over 1,500 tenants in Toronto, and more than half did not have renters insurance. This resulted in many tenants living in a makeshift shelter for months, while many of those with insurance were able to receive financial support to transition into other housing.
If your parents or guardians are Canadian and own a home, their homeowner's insurance may cover you for no additional charge if you are still considered a dependent, such as a full-time undergraduate student under age 25. Be sure to call their provider to inquire. If this isn't the case, you can shop around for different tenant insurance policies. It's usually around $25 to $30 a month, and TD's company called TD Meloche Monex offers a student discount for the University of Toronto.
Once students have figured out their anticipated living costs, many often decide to get a roommate or two to save on costs.
We suggest using the Roommate Finder tool located within the Housing Finder at offcampushousing.utoronto.ca. Log in using your Join ID or UTAR ID to see all of the property listings and a section just for U of T students to find roommates. You can create a profile and view prospective roommates. This includes fellow students who are also looking for places to rent or students who already have a place and are looking to fill a spare room, which can be one of the fastest ways to find a place.
You can also find roommates in the campus community, such as classmates, fellow student group members, and floor mates and residents. Don't forget to connect through the network by talking to people on social media and through incoming class pages and groups. It's really important to make sure that to take the time to assess any prospective roommates to see if you're a good fit to live together. Even your best friend might not be an ideal roommate. We would argue that the most important factors of good roommateship are to share similar lifestyles and agree to treat each other's needs with respect.
Housing Services offers a series of downloadable documents on our website that you can use in your apartment hunt. One of these documents is our roommate compatibility checklist, which is like a paper BuzzFeed quiz. We encourage you and anyone you're thinking about living with to fill it out and compare answers. It can be helpful to see what you have in common and use as a starting point to discuss how you will handle lifestyle differences, especially around expectations regarding cleanliness and having guests over.
Once you have agreed to be roommates, it's important to establish ground rules to set expectations before stressful times like exam season. Our roommate agreement can help you determine these house rules and gather basic information like each other's contact info and emergency contacts. In addition to basic things like noise, bedtimes, and cleaning, you may also want to review some COVID-19 expectations.
So we've arrived at the step you've been waiting for, how to actually search for apartments.
Start looking 44 to 60 days before you want to move into a unit. The reason for this is that in Ontario, tenants owe their landlords 60 days advance written notice before moving out. So a lot of landlords only find out that the unit will become available 2 months before. It is extremely uncommon for a landlord to advertise much more than that. Most leases begin on the first of the month, so if you're thinking about moving in on September 1st, you can expect most rentals appearing in early July, with many still posted throughout August.
So Paloma, where should students begin searching?
The easiest option, if you will be living alone, so without a partner, a pet, or child, is to consider an off-campus independent student housing building. We'll cover these in detail in the next few slides. These buildings typically only rent to students and aim to offer a resident-like experience, streamlining costs and offering events and activities. It is important to note that these buildings are not owned or operated by U of T, and any affiliation is not related to student leases. And we're not able to influence their leasing process.
So here is a breakdown of the various independent student housing buildings around U of T's downtown campus. Campus Common, Campus One, and Parkside all have 12-month leases. Campus Common runs like an apartment. You can rent a studio or a 2 or 3 bedroom unit with a fridge and a stove, and you furnish the rest. It has no dining hall, so you cook for yourself. Campus One and Parkside are sister companies, and they are considered luxury student housing. They have an emphasis on safety, events, and activities. They both have dining halls and required meal plans. These buildings are the most expensive of all the student housing options.
Tartu College and Neil Wyzik are more affordable and flexible, so they have 8-month and 4-month leases. They are apartment style with common spaces and your own bedroom in a shared unit. As you're paying fewer fees, the building has less resources. So historically, we have seen the management of these buildings to be a bit slower to respond to issues. In any housing situation, it's important to be comfortable being an advocate for yourself, meaning making requests in writing, escalating if no action is being taken, and contacting our office if you require additional support.
Harrington Housing is an unusual offering. Rather than being its own building, this company partners with apartments to rent out whole floors in which they furnish the entire unit on each floor, and they rent out on a per room basis. Most of these are located in a new apartment building up at Sherbourne and Bloor, a few subway stops away from campus. You can choose to either rent a whole unit with people who you know, or they can assign you roommates.
Homa Dorma is a homestay company where the company finds rooms for rent with host families. They go to each host family's home and interview them, do a background check, and photograph the place.
U of T students have lived in all of these buildings or worked with these businesses in the past. Remember, this option is only for individuals living alone. We also encourage you to do your own research on any housing option.
Many people are interested in finding their own housing, whether a private unit or shared with roommates. You can search all available off-campus listings using our housing finder at offcampushousing.utoronto.ca, which we mentioned earlier regarding the roommate section.
When you log into the Housing Finder using your Join ID or your UTOR ID, you can see all of the listings of the private and shared units being advertised to U of T students and get in contact with the lister directly through the site. We review every ad before it is posted, but we still encourage you to treat any ad you see online as if it could potentially be a scam and seek to verify that it's legitimate before handing over any personal information or money. If you have any concerns that an ad listed on there is a scam, we do welcome you to contact us.
There are also websites like Padmapper, Kijiji, Condos.ca, or Realtor.ca, and Facebook groups. The university doesn't have any official Facebook groups, but they are a good place to search. These groups will have properties for students and other tenants, but may also have scams. So make sure to verify a property before handing over any information or money.
We understand that searching for housing can be incredibly stressful. Our best tips to de-stress this process include being persistent, meaning that you don't just look once or apply to one listing, but rather keep consistently searching on a regular basis. Being flexible, recognizing that you can have priorities and deal breakers, but some aspects of a rental situation must be categorized as a nice to have rather than a need to have. And understanding the process and being prepared, which is something you're doing right now by watching this.
The main priorities for you as a tenant should be safety, affordability, and proximity. Safety is number one because it's not worth living somewhere close and cheap if you feel unsafe. Deciding whether affordability or proximity is second most important is really a personal choice. Is it worth a commute to save on money, or would you rather spend more to be a few minutes walk from campus?
Scams are unfortunately very real in the online housing world, and they exist in every major city, including Toronto. We hope to equip you with some key knowledge to help prevent getting scammed.
You can verify the property by doing a Google search of the address as well as the landlord's name and email. Does a real property show up? Does the landlord's name beside the word scam show up?
Keeping your cash close means not paying anything until you have to. In Ontario, landlords may only legally ask for an advance deposit of 1 month's rent to be applied as last month's rent, and a refundable key deposit, the amount it would cost to replace the key that should be refunded to you when you move out. It's important to only pay this money at the time of signing the lease. If you are signing a lease and you will be moving in soon, the landlord may ask you to pay first and last month's rent, which you could choose to agree to, or you could let them know that you'll be paying your deposit now, and on the lease start date, you will pay your full first month's rent. I want to emphasize that this information about deposits applies to all renters protected under the RTA, so even if you are an international student. If your unit is under the RTA, meaning you do not share a kitchen or bathroom with your landlord or their immediate family, a landlord is not legally allowed to ask you for more than 1 month's rent deposit. You can offer, but you are not legally obligated to do so. So cleaning fees, application fees, security deposits, damage deposits, holding fees, none of those are legitimate, just last month's rent deposit and a refundable key deposit.
It is important to understand the market. If you see a private $900 condo on Bay Street, it's probably a scam. Some neighborhoods outside of the downtown are less expensive. Be sure to do your own research to find out what's the average in the area.
If something seems too good to be true, it probably isn't real. Ask the landlord why they're offering a discount. It's important to keep your guard up and have the landlord prove to you that it's a real unit that they own before you hand over any personal information or money. Remember, you should only be paying money at the time of signing the lease.
Lastly, it is critical that you check the place out, as viewings rule out most scams. While the COVID-19 pandemic is ongoing, it is common to ask for a virtual viewing. A live video viewing is ideal to avoid being sent a recording of a fake property.
Let's talk a bit more about how to arrange a viewing.
As we've said, scams are real, and seeing the unit is the best way to avoid being scammed. It happens with photos and it will happen with videos too. A live video viewing is best, and make sure you ask critical questions like the ones we've listed here will help you feel more reassured about about applying to live in that unit.
So, how do you set up a viewing? You can contact landlords by email or phone to request a viewing of the unit virtually or in person. We prefer using the phone over emails, as landlords often get inundated with emails. But we recognize that sometimes that may be the only option. So you should be professional and mature. You can give them a few details, such as what year you're in, what you're studying, and what your availability for a viewing is like. You don't need to share your age or gender unless the accommodation is shared based on gender, which hopefully the ad will specify. Be flexible and try to make a virtual meeting time work with the landlord. Be sure to express your desire for a live viewing.
You should also consider COVID-19 implications. In non-pandemic times, you would normally be expected to apply for a rental application right after the viewing, but you may have a little more time to consider your options with a virtual viewing. It's extremely important to remember that once you sign a lease, you are legally bound to the terms. The law has not allowed tenants to break their leases, even for COVID-19 related reasons, so proceed with caution. A landlord must agree to end the lease, which is uncommon because they have little incentive to do so, or you will be forced to try to find someone to replace you while remaining financially responsible for the unit until then.
So we have two handy documents to use, our apartment viewing checklist and landlord Q&A. The apartment viewing checklist helps you quickly tick off items like, does the unit come with a fridge? Do all the drawers open? Is there any visible damage? And the landlord Q&A answers questions like, are there any major renovations planned? And where do online parcels get delivered?
Many students look for units while living outside of Toronto, whether elsewhere in Canada or abroad. Some of our tips can include renting with one of the student housing buildings we listed earlier, as they are legitimate buildings and allow you to sign leases for September a few months in advance.
Working with a realtor can be an easy way to search as it's a free service for renters, but please keep in mind that realtors will only find properties that are average market price, so you need to have the budget to accommodate.
During non-pandemic times, this is what a lot of students do to find housing. Come to Toronto a week or two before their intended move-in date, stay in temporary housing like an Airbnb, a hotel, etc., and make it a full-time job to find places. It's the best way to avoid scams.
One of the easiest ways to find housing can be to move in with existing tenants who are looking to fill a spare room. If you are an international student, sometimes landlords can be more comfortable by allowing you to move in if they have an existing relationship with the current tenants, and especially if those tenants do not need guarantors or have Canadian guarantors.
Once you have viewed a unit and you are interested in living there, a landlord will likely ask you to submit a rental application, which is a package of information that helps them assess whether you would be a good tenant to have. It is critical that they assess only valid factors such as your credit history and demonstrated ability to pay rent, and not on discriminatory factors like your age, race, religion, or sexual orientation.
Here, you can see all of the documents a landlord may ask for with a rental application. You can start by preparing all of these documents now, even if you are unsure of when you want to move in. Firstly, it is critical that you are able to communicate your plan to pay your rent to a landlord, whether that is from your own employment income, savings, or the support of a guarantor.
If you do not have your own employment income or enough savings to cover your rent, you will need a guarantor. This is a standard expectation that landlords have for full-time undergraduate students, although it ultimately depends on your circumstances. A guarantor co-signs your lease and assumes financial responsibility for you. It is usually a parent or an older sibling. It is usually someone Canadian because they need a Canadian credit score and working history to provide that they can take financial responsibility. This person may agree to pay in the event that you do not, or they may just pay all your rent on your behalf. Their name may be listed on the lease as a guarantor in brackets, but they are not a legal tenant.
So, going back to this complete list, if you have a job or have savings, then your landlord may be interested in getting this information on the left-hand column from you. But if you will be in school full time, a landlord may insist on you having a guarantor and will therefore seek this information from your guarantor. Landlords will seek a Canadian credit report and credit score, which is a measure of your financial reliability. Scores range from 300 to 900 points, with 300 at the bottom and 900 being a perfect score. You need at least 700 points to be considered having good credit in Toronto. A credit score is determined by your credit report, which lists all of the places you owe money, like your cell phone bill and credit card, and tabs whether you have any amounts outstanding. If you are consistent and make your payments in full and on time, this builds up your score. If you are required to have a guarantor, the landlord will be looking for their credit report and credit score. All students should think about starting or building up their Canadian credit history. You can start as small as having a cell phone bill in your name and paying it off yourself, or even having your parents transfer you money to pay it off. This is crucial to build your credit score, and having a good credit score allows you to borrow money, such as when it's time for you to buy a car or a home in the future. Avoid spending more than you can pay and pay things off in full and on time, otherwise you will hurt your credit.
If you don't have a guarantor, you need to plan to pay rent. You want to make sure you can articulate this plan in a convincing way. So having supporting letters, a letter from your job, and your credit report and score. For the job letter, the landlord wants to know you are making enough to pay your bills. And if they want the guarantor's job letter, they want to know that the guarantor can cover their own expenses and yours if need be.
You also need funds for first and last month's rent. You just need that money to be available in your bank account, so once the lease is signed, you're able to hand it over, and you shouldn't pay it before you're required to.
You will likely also need references. Ideally this will be from a former landlord. However, it could also be from a supervisor or a teacher who can speak on your behalf and speak to your character as reliable, responsible, an individual who will not damage the landlord's home and will pay your rent on time. Government photo ID and previous addresses are pretty standard.
Sometimes a landlord will ask for a full year of rent upfront. This is not legal, so you can let your landlord know that this isn't something you want to do per your legal rights as a tenant. You do run the risk that they may refuse to rent to you as a result, so you may need to negotiate or walk away. You can choose to offer to pay more than 1 month's rent as a deposit, but you are not legally obligated to do so.
As many people have the same name, landlords sometimes ask for social insurance numbers to verify the credit report they are looking for, that is in fact your own. It is a unique identifier. However, this is very sensitive information and we discourage you from handing it over as it is not always kept confidential and secure. It's better to give your birth date and current address.
Your landlord can ask questions related to tenancy, but cannot ask personal questions that infringe upon your rights under the Ontario Human Rights Code. So a prospective landlord can ask questions like, are you a student? Who will you live with? What do you earn? Do you smoke? Do you have pets? But they cannot ask you questions about your age, religion, ethnic origin, sexual orientation, whether you are pregnant or intend to become pregnant, etc. A landlord can only ask about your gender if the space is shared based on gender with existing tenants.
So let's say you have determined your needs, found roommates, searched for apartments, viewed and applied to live in a unit, and the landlord accepts your application. You've reached the final step of signing a lease.
For all tenancies under the Residential Tenancies Act, RTA, landlords should be using the Ontario Standard Lease Form when signing a lease. We encourage you to insist on this when you sign your lease agreement. It is critical to get your lease in writing. While verbal leases are technically allowed in Ontario, we have never seen conflicts end in the favor of the tenant. Be sure to collect critical data from the landlord, including their full legal name and multiple methods to contact them. Ideally phone and email. Remember that only valid terms in lease can be upheld. For example, even if a landlord writes that you have to do your own maintenance and repairs, such as shoveling snow, the law, the RTA, states that maintenance and repairs are a landlord's responsibility, and therefore this term is not valid and cannot be upheld even if you sign the lease. So a landlord can't evict you because you don't shovel your own snow.
Most leases are 12-month long in initial length. If you want to move out during the 12-month period, it is considered breaking your lease and your landlord doesn't have to agree to it. You may need to assign or sublet your unit then.
If you want to leave at the end of your 1-year lease, you need to put this in writing to your landlord at least 60 days in advance, and we recommend adding on a few days just in case. If you want to keep living there, you don't need to sign anything at all. No new lease. The terms of the original lease just continue to apply. All leases under the RTA automatically roll over to being month to month after a 1-year term.
Renting month to month still gives you the same housing security as a 12-month long lease and is more flexible for you as a renter. All it means is that with month to month, you aren't locked into a whole year of not being able to move out without penalty. You're only locked in for 2 months at a time, as you still must give 60 days notice before moving out. If you don't have any intentions of moving out, just keep paying your rent in full and on time, and that's it.
Rent can only go up once in a 12-month period, and your landlord has to give you 90 days of advance written notice if they're going to increase the rent.
If a unit was constructed on or after November 15th, 2018, there is no rent cap in place. This means that landlords in newer units can raise the rent any amount they want.
Units older than November 15, 2018 have a rent cap. For 2020, the amount they can go up is 2.2% of your current rent. So if you plan to live somewhere long-term, consider renting in an older building.
As a tenant, you have rights and responsibilities.
As a tenant, you have the right to a safe home, vital services including heat, hydro, hot and cold water, gas, privacy, controlled rent increases, protection from unlawful eviction, children in the home, and your legal tenant documents. For more details on any of these, check out our tenant rights video or go to stepstojustice.ca.
As a tenant, before you move in, you are responsible for being prepared to be committed, paying your key deposit, paying first and last month's rent, taking photos of the unit prior to move-in, booking elevators for move-out and move-in, arranging for utility connections, and setting up tenant's insurance.
As a tenant after you move in, you are responsible for keeping your home clean, repairing damage that you or your guests cause, being reasonably quiet, obeying the law and the city bylaws, honoring your lease agreement, and paying your rent in full and on time. Steps to Justice covers a variety of legal topics, especially on housing. There's even a specific section on COVID-19. It covers topics like evictions, paying rent, and even your rights as a tenant. We highly recommend bookmarking this site and referencing it whenever you have a question about your tenant's rights. We're here to help.
We're currently a virtual office, and the fastest way to get in touch with us is through email. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.